Well, good morning, or good afternoon, or evening, whenever you're watching this. Thank you for joining Coffee with Granny. I got my new coffee mug today. Um, my nephew gave this to me for Christmas with some delicious coffee, and he's the one that helped me start my original YouTube channel 5 years ago. So thank you, Justin, because he watches. I want to talk to you this morning about memories of a phenomenon. Memories of the blizzard of February 1956. It was one to remember, and I will never forget it. I was 10 years old, and I hope to never live through anything like that ever again. I made notes because I had to research a little bit about the storm because, it's been a few years and my memory is not the best in the world anymore, and so I wanted to get my details right. So I made some notes. But the weathermen had predicted a pretty bad event, a blizzard. But on February the 1st, when it started snowing, it snowed an inch or two and quit. And everybody, of course said, well, the weatherman goofed again, and nothing came of it. And we all go to bed. Well, when we wake up the next morning, it is a blizzard. And the wind was anywhere up to 50 miles an hour. And the snow so heavy that you couldn't see a foot in front of you. And if you can imagine all of the tourists and the travelers, a lot of them were stuck and a lot of them were in jeopardy. There was, where we lived, it's 90 miles from Amarillo to Dumas, where you're going north. And then another, 20 miles to Cactus. It was Cactus, Texas, where I lived, Phillips 66 community for workers at the plant. And my dad was at work and couldn't get back to the house. And it snowed for 4 more days. Never stopped. It didn't bother me, the snow, but the wind. Oh my gosh, the wind. The wind was bad. Well, being from the north top of Texas and go down past Lubbock and down is more than 300 miles. So we're talking a radius of 300-400 miles, and it probably went down even further into Texas. I don't remember how far south it went, but it covered a huge area. The top of Texas, the Texas Panhandle, still today is a cattle feeding industry state. We, up here in the Panhandle, we have probably 90 feed yards. And we had a lot then, and the feed yards were full of cattle. Well, stop and think about winds blowing 50 miles an hour and blowing snow up those cattle's nostrils. And if they didn't suffocate, they froze to death. It bothered me so much as a child to think of those poor cattle. I know they're just animals, but still, and what a terrible way to die. And the loss in the Panhandle was thousands and thousands of cattle. And it was economically a disaster. Well, what's so surprising, though, is in human life, there were only 23 accounted deaths across the Panhandle. And to me, that's phenomenal. I think that's a miracle in the hand of the Lord. But what is sad about it is some people died like 5 feet from their front door. They couldn't get back they couldn't find the door. The visibility was that bad. And you froze in an instant out there. I don't remember, nobody ever said what the temperature was, but it had to have been in the teens or 20s or very, very uncomfortable. Well, that's what you call a whiteout. A whiteout is when it's just blinding snow and you can't see nothing but white. And it's bad on the eyes. And we had, in our little community, we had between 28 and 32 inches of snow. I think Amarillo only had 18 inches, 14 to 18 inches. So see, it varied from town to town. And I don't remember how much any of the other towns got except one. Vega, Texas, is about 40 miles due west of Amarillo. Maybe not quite 40 miles, 30, 40. They got 61 inches of snow. And that is a record that still stands today. Can you imagine? They were buried. The whole town was buried. Well, in our little town, it's a community of maybe 200 people. The houses were 2 in the front and 2 in the back, a section of 4 homes together, apartments. And we were naturally compacted in there, and that wind and those drifts covered us up. We were totally buried. And I was 10, and my little sister was 2, and my brother or 3, she was 3, and my little brother 1, whatever, and left with my mom. And my mother got one of the windows finally open. I don't know how she ever did it, but she got one of the windows open just enough to dig into the snow, and we put our food that needed to stay cold because we had no electricity. And she did that, and that saved us. We had something to eat. And I called my sister because, I was trying to think. I don't remember being cold. So what happened? And she said, well, Jacqueline, we had a gas stove in the hallway in the wall, which sounds very dangerous, doesn't it? But that's what saved us from freezing to death. And I remember it was dark, of course. I don't remember if Mother lit candles, or there's just so much of it that I don't really remember. But it snowed for 5 days, and I don't remember how long it took for my dad to get to us. Now, think about this. The houses are covered. How do you find your particular house? But he dug and got through somehow that window that Mother had the food in. And all of us kids saw our daddy climbing through the window, and he got home to us. It was the worst blizzard ever recorded. So far. There was one worse, I think, in the 20s, but for our lifetime, 1956 was the worst ever, and the worst economically because of all of the cattle that were lost. And I want to tell you a particular story. You know, all we had was a radio. And they were telling people if you could get out in the house enough to get up on top, if you had access, I guess, to the attic, I don't know, to stamp out certain letters for help. And X was for fuel, F was for food, and D was for a doctor. And then people would try to get you the help that you needed. And another story is about a bus full of people. There were 16 passengers, and 2 of them were children. And they took off from Amarillo, just when it started snowing, took off to go to, and the next stop was Tucumcari, which is just straight west on I-40. They never made it. They slid off into a ditch, spent the night and part of the next day till noon, and the bus driver thought, I have got to go get help. Nobody's ever going to find us. Nobody's out here. And we're all going to freeze to death. And they had no food. So that man, I wished I knew that man's name. I would give him the credit. He started walking. And can you imagine on what he had to walk on and the labor of walking in the snow like that? Well, he took off at right after lunch, and he made it. I think I read that it went off the road 8 miles from Tucumcari. 8 miles. He started walking about right after lunch, and at 10 o'clock that night, he got there. And they immediately got snowplows and went back and rescued everybody on that bus. That man was so brave, and you know he had frostbite. You know he did. He paid the price for what he did, but bless his heart. Bless his heart for doing it. I would love to hear from somebody that lived through this experience. I really would. I would love to hear your story. It would mean the world to me to hear from somebody that remembers very well what happened. I know you'd have to have been a child, but you didn't forget it. That's for sure. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this little bit of history. Until we meet again, God bless.